Don't get me wrong, listen, I'm not trying to start a fight. I'm trying to help people who have lost their faith to find their way back to Christ. Boy, did I kick a hornet's nest. So yeah, this video I made about about Richard Dawkins and his insults to Christianity and God.
The God of the Old Testament has got to be the most unpleasant character in all fiction.
And how, people of faith need to be able to respond to it. So I made some statements and I just spoke in general terms, but I did conclude weakly. Weak in the sense that I said, I know God, and because I know him, that's the impression you would get, that because I know him, therefore God exists. I can tell you what you might call anecdotal evidence, but I know this God. I have seen him work in my life. I have seen him work in my parents' life. He has, oh my goodness, I've seen him work in my family. I've seen him, oh my goodness, do so many wonderful things for me. I know him. And because of that, I have this relationship with him. I trust him. I'm happy to go any length with him. Well, that is true because I know him, God exists. But more than that, it's important for me to be able to at least point you in the right direction. Like that little line in, in the Matrix said, I can show you the door. You're the one who's going to have to walk through it.
But I can only show you the door. You're the one that has to walk through it.
But then all these comments just pop up in the comment section. People some with insults, some with legitimate questions, and I'm fine with all of that. But I do need to be able to give an answer. I am not afraid to give an answer. Some have invited me to a debate. It's not that I can't debate. It's not something I'm interested in, and I mentioned it in that previous video. I learn a lot from these debates, but I do not personally approve of it. I understand the part about having your answers ready, always being ready to give an answer, but at the same time, I don't think we should be actively chasing debates. The Bible tells us to avoid profane and vain babblings and oppositions of science, falsely so called. Debate is just not my thing. I mean, I can debate. I'm actually good at it. I just don't like it. Especially with respect to faith. I don't think that's what we are supposed to be doing. I will address the issue about my concerns, my responses to the questions raised by evolution as a whole, and the answers that already exist. I'll make those statements right now. But first, my response. I'm not keen on a debate. Okay? I have a friend. We grew up together. One of the gentlemen whom these videos are addressed to. We grew up together. We are people of faith. And he has grown up and he has walked away from the faith. And for the past, say, 3 to 4 years, we've been engaging on this topic. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And we have not come to an agreement. Let me put it that way. And so the idea that I don't know how to debate is actually wrong. I'm actually quite good at it, but it's not what I'm about. I don't want to debate. Because life is actually a lot simpler than that. One of the videos that I have made, but I have not yet edited it and put it online yet, regards some of these things that are no-brainers. They are basic things we already know, but for some reason we choose not to acknowledge them. And so we end up wasting 20, 30, 50, 70 years beating about the bush. And then somebody comes up one day with a double-blinded, peer-reviewed study and says, oh, this is our finding. We have found out that when you drink water, you can sleep. It's as silly. If you ask me, you will see the same response when I'm doing that, when I put that video up, when I'm able to get around to editing it. So in a similar way, let me just address the issues as quickly as possible. These things are as straightforward as they are. First question that I asked, which nobody addressed. I'm asking it again now. The first writing in the Bible is by Moses, who put together Genesis through Deuteronomy, the first 5 books of the Bible. Moses lived 3,500 years ago. It's approximately 15 to 1200 BC, before Christ. The last books in the Bible are written about the time of Christ. So spanning over that whole period, that's the timeline of more or less, let's say, the Bible. Okay. In that book, there are descriptions of animals that are obviously dinosaurs. I mentioned 3 of them. The behemoth, Leviathan, the way I would say it with my own accent, and cockatrice. Explain how, with the technology they have, or they had, or did not have at that time, Moses, David, who lived another 1,000 years or so, 1,500 years after that, after Moses. Job, who lived maybe a few thousand years, but 1,000 years before Moses. How they sat down together and coordinated across the times to create creatures in their head that don't exist or that died 65 million years previously. Explain that to me. Now here's the problem. Right now in Israel, they are excavating the city of David. So David lived. There's a stone that was found. Was it maybe 2 years ago, with an inscription from the king of, is it Tyre? I can't remember.
Yeah, the Moabite stone is a hugely important inscription. It's a Moabite inscription in which Mesha, the king of Moab, records his victories against the kingdom of Israel. And this, of course, records the same events, by the way, as are recorded in Scripture, 2 Kings chapter 3, just from the Moabite perspective. But in it, Mesha claims to have killed a king of the house of David.
Just so you know that I've seen these things, I'm not just speaking out of thin air. That inscribed that we fought with the kingdom of David, and we overthrew it.
This was the first major discovery that people suggested mentioned the house of David, and indeed it does. It's part of a victory monument, a stela that was set up by a king of Aram, likely Hazael, but he's not mentioned in it. And in this particular stela, he mentions it mentions that he killed a king of the house of David. The house of David is mentioned in it.
That was which harkens to a story in First Kings or Second Kings, where I think Hazael, or I think it was Hezekiah, one of the kings, one of the descendants of David, lost to the king of Tyre or something.
But he said it was most likely erected following Hazael's defeat of Joram and Ahaziah at Ramoth Gilead in about 841 BC. The occasion for the breaking of the stela was probably when Jehoash, king of Israel, from 798 to 782, recaptured the Israelite territory previously taken by Hazael. This establishes clearly David's historicity. Moreover, the house of David means dynasty of David.
So we know that David lived.
Well, obviously, first of all, it affirms the historicity of King David, which is something that Bible minimalists had downplayed. And it affirms the biblical description of the kingdom that David ruled over. There are huge messianic things tied up with David. David wrote a number of psalms that were messianic psalms that pointed to the one who would come. And so when we read in the New Testament, we read about Jesus, the King, the Messiah, the one that King David promised. And if we can trust the details of history about David, and I believe we can, then I think we can trust the words of David, including the ones about Jesus.
And David sings about Leviathan. David lived what? Approximately 3,000 years ago. How did David know what Leviathan is? Mind you, this is an animal that lives underwater, that breathes fire. clearly described in the book of Job? Did he conjure it up in his head? So if dinosaurs were around in the time of David, and Saint George, who lived well after Christ, is known in English law for having slain dragons. So dragons were around approximately 1,000 years ago. How do you come to the conclusion that they died 65 million years ago? Answer that. Also, answer the question of soft tissue, cells, blood cells, vessels being found in the bones of dinosaurs in present day, if they've been there 65 million years. Somebody's telling me I don't even know what evolution is, trying to throw a mix, trying to throw that little. Listen, I've seen these debates. I know that the word evolution is a catch-all phrase. There are different kinds of evolution. When we speak in general terms and say evolution, we are talking about macro evolution, of which there is no evidence. And the closest thing you have to evidence is some flies that were grown in a lab under very controlled conditions that you cannot replicate in the wild. But you need millions and millions and millions and millions of years to suggest that they've been around for what? That these creatures gave birth to themselves by natural selection. Explain why a dinosaur would prefer to convert into a bird. How did it shrink that much? And then why did it decide to convert back into a mammal over millions and millions of years? Doesn't make sense. So I have those questions. I asked questions about Noah's Ark. How come they are what you call flood myths? Yet, so many cultures, if not all cultures in the world today, have myths, what you call myths, have stories in their culture that date back to antiquity and talk about a certain flood that enveloped the whole earth and only one family survived. It's in Chinese culture. The man is called Nuhu. Wow, so close to the word Noah. It's in South American culture. Forgotten the name that they call it. You'll find it almost everywhere you look. Explain. Now, I've read an article about it where the man came to the conclusion that does it mean that the flood happened or did not happen? Well, what is the most likelihood? The conclusion in that same article says, actually, yeah, it looks like there was probably a flood. So we're looking at this article titled, "Did the Bible Borrow the Noah's Ark Story from the Epic of Gilgamesh?" Mind, I didn't mention the Epic of Gilgamesh earlier on. That's just under one of those so-called myths. So you'll find this article on howstuffworks.com, and I will leave a link for it in the description below. And so in this article, we get to a place where the writer asks the question, do multiple accounts point to a real flood? And it mentions Irving Finkel, George Smith, but it comes to this conclusion. It says this: Pryke agrees that it's a reasonable thing to assume that there was a flood. You see, when you come to the realization that you cannot get around the fact that hundreds, if not thousands of cultures around the world have this same story in their history, you know it cannot be a myth. It cannot be a myth. But he is refusing to acknowledge that all these evidences point to is that there was an actual flood. He's refusing to acknowledge that, even though that's the only possible conclusion. Okay, so he's saying there was a flood, but it probably wasn't global. Who is deceiving who? But the article refused to acknowledge that the flood had to be global. You look at the maps of Africa, look at the terrain, just look at it from a distance, satellite maps. you can see that there was a wave that flew from the western side of Africa across the continent, almost gets as far as Nigeria. So what the idea, listen, I can debate. I'm not looking at anything, I'm just speaking off the top of my head right now. And we can get into all this ontological and all this. I don't care about all those things. But I have seen enough to prove to me that evolution is BS, nonsense. Now, I can write a science exam and I will answer the questions this way science wants it answered, but I know the truth. I read my Bible, and the Bible is clear enough for me. You may choose to believe that a snake did not speak. You may choose to believe that a donkey did not speak. You may choose to believe that it's not possible that the sun and moon stood still or that the Red Sea parted. You can't prove that it did not happen. You can be incredulous about it, but you can't prove that it did not happen. But the ones that we can prove are clear, and they are all still stories in the same Bible. The Bible is a historical document written by those who saw it happen, or who grew, who were born from that same culture through oral histories, and eventually it was written down. But from the time of Jesus, at the very least, we know that Jesus lived. It's not written only by Christians. Josephus acknowledges it. He was a Jew, but he wasn't a Christian. I think he was a slave of the Romans. Bar Eman, who used to be a Christian and has chosen not to be a Christian anymore, his choice. Bar Eman says that there is nothing that is more certain than the fact that Jesus lived and died. Now, we can argue about him being raised from the dead. I'm not going to. The Bible tells me that he does. The evidence shows that he does. According to the book of, according to 1 Corinthians chapter 15, Paul writes that by the time he was writing, he was talking about people who saw Jesus alive before he ascended into heaven. About 500 people seeing him at the same time. Some of them were dead, some were still alive. Nobody refuted what he said, and they were alive at the time. Then you come up today because you choose not to believe what has been written and has been proven over time to be consistent. And then you are asking questions and you are laughing and trying to make mockery. I'm not engaging on that level. If you want us to engage, let me tell you something. You know what? Go find Ken Ham. Go find David Wood. Go watch the videos of Nabil Qureshi before he died. Even Ravi Zacharias, yes, he had a flaw toward the end of his life, and I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sorry about it. It hurts. But just listen to the words the man spoke. Kent Hovind, he engages all of you guys on arguments, on debates all the time. Yeah, I don't have to spend too much time debating evolution versus creation all over the place. You want to debate, is it possible for the ark to have contained so many animals? It didn't have to contain all the animals. There were some marine animals that would have survived fine in the water. Oh, if there were dinosaurs in the world, it didn't have to carry adult dinosaurs. It could have carried baby dinosaurs. Why didn't they eat each other? A, they were young. They didn't have to. B, in the Bible, they were all herbivores before they came out of the ark. And God now finally said, okay, you can eat flesh. The Bible says that. So there are answers to all your questions. It's just not my forte. So go watch David Wood. Go watch Ken Ham. Go watch Kent Hovind. The guy whoops your tush all the time. He may not get everything right. He doesn't have to. Just has to raise enough questions to poke holes in your religion. Where are the holes you've poked in the Bible? All you can say is it's not likely. Doesn't make sense. God is not trying to make sense. He didn't ask for your permission before he made the world. He's not looking at your blueprint to run the world the way he wants to. That's my response to my brethren who keep throwing these questions. Don't get me wrong. Listen, I'm not trying to start a fight. I'm trying to help people who have lost their faith to find their way back to Christ. Please, don't misunderstand me because my accent is heavy. Somebody challenged me and said because it looks like English is not your first language or something of that nature. Yeah, it's so childish. Does it matter what language I'm speaking if I'm speaking the truth? Does it matter if I understand English if what I'm saying is right? Ask yourselves, why do you want to hold on to evolution so strongly? Explain to me, how did non-matter become matter? How did nothing create everything? And how did non-living matter come alive? I know you've created all those proteins in the lab, but have you been able to breathe life into them? I know the answer. I mean, I've seen all the debates, so many of them. Ask yourself. Somebody's telling me what's the theory? Listen, there's a reason why Newton's laws are called Newton's laws, because they are laws. There's a reason why gravity is a law, because it's a law. There's a reason why evolution is a theory, because it's a theory. I didn't say it's an hypothesis. There's evidence that suggests that evolution may be true, but it's inconclusive. The Cambrian explosion is a problem for evolution. The Cambrian explosion is a problem for evolution. All these creatures, even though they're supposed to have taken millions and millions of years, all these creatures appear out of thin air over a very short period of time that cannot possibly be millions. Where did they come from? That's the Cambrian explosion. Let's look at the fossil record. Trilobites on top of Mount Everest. How did they get there? I can go on. That's not what this is about. I'm trying to show you that there are answers to the questions you're asking. And even though I don't want to engage because it's a lot of work and I don't want to do that hard work, please don't mistake me for somebody who doesn't know what I'm talking about. I really care about you guys. Now, if you want a debate, go to the guys who debate. If you want answers, I will give you the answers as they are given by the Word of God, the Bible, which you have disliked, which you have hated, but which has never changed since the time it was written. I know they are trying to change it now. That's why, well, I try to keep a record of the Bibles I have, so I can use them to infinity if I have to. For brethren, brothers, sisters, people who have questions, people who are sincere, people who are looking for answers, ask a question, leave a comment, click on like, click on subscribe, the whole 9 yards. Share this video. There are people who need to hear my response to all the questions to that last video. There are other videos that I have made that I have not yet properly edited and I still intend to put online, but I just had to answer these questions because so many people have been asking me. I mean, the comments on that video, my goodness, it's hilarious to think that. I mean, come on guys, please stop. Ask sincere questions. I will do my best to give sincere answers. Thank you for watching. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.